Section here is the viticultural practices, particularly with emphasis on this area, but some of them are generalized as well. What you're looking at as a vineyard manager is you're trying to monitor the effects of climate, vine disease, and pests. All right, so those are the three big things that you're keeping an eye on as a manager to see how you can either mitigate or prevent some of these things. So what do we do to do that? How do we deal with that? Well, the big one is canopy management. We're going to spend time on that. But we also use irrigation, and we use the use of agrochemicals. All right. So let's look at each of these to see what we're doing in each of these areas to help give us the best crop we can for the year that we're in. So on canopy management, if that grapevine is left on its own, you just sit back on the veranda and have a glass of wine and watch it grow. It turns into a great big friggin' bush, massive bush with things going everywhere. It's a mess. It's a massive, unruly bush. So within that context, your job as a manager is try to get that vine to do what you want it to do rather than what it wants to do. Because it's a tricky, it's probably one of the trickiest things to do in the vineyard is to manage the canopy properly because of the unknowns like climate. The overall goal of the vineyard manager in canopy management is try to create the optimum leaf fruit load so you have enough leaves to do what you want and you have enough fruit that those leaves will support. And again, it's a tricky one because you don't know about the climate. The leaves, of course, what do? They make photosynthesis. What's their job? Making energy. They make energy to grow the plant. So plants growing all over the place, and then what's left over, maybe they'll try to balance or to ripen the fruit. Well, what if it's growing like crazy and then the climate changes and we don't have enough energy left to do that? So you've got to take this, and it's a very subjective process to be able to get that management so the canopy looks appropriate for the amount of fruit you're trying to support in that. So you're both trying to figure out what's going on in the climate up to that point, your weather, and what may happen, which is always tricky. You've got long-term forecasts, but that's a bit iffy. Okay, so what do we do to maximize the canopy to do what you want it to do? Well, the first thing you're doing, and we're doing this right now, is you don't want any superfluous leaves around. There are buds all over a vine, buds on the trunk, there are buds on the canes, and so you've got to rub off all those things down there on the trunk. They're starting to get rid of those. They don't do anything except sap energy out of the plant. So you rub those things off, and you'll do that several times over the period of time. Just take them off, leave them on the ground. You'll also deal with suckers. The plants are almost always grafted onto a different rootstock. And that rootstock, they don't mind growing their own leaves coming out of the ground. So if they start doing that, they got to be taken away. So you're rubbing the trunk, you're taking off all these suckers. And as these things grow, what you're also doing is shoot positioning. So the shoot positioning, you've got the cane, you've got all these shoots growing, and they'll grow all over the place again unless you take them. You've got trellising. You want to get those shoots, everyone going as much as you can, straight up in the wires, give them a vertical perspective. And the purpose of all that, of course, is to open the canopy up as much as you can so you get the wind blowing through, minimize disease. You also get a better exposure for each shoot to the sun with the minimum amount of vegetation. And you'll also be able to get your sprays in there easier if you've got a bit of an opening there. All right. So what else you're going to be doing at this stage? You're going to do actually a shoot removal, because as these little buds burst forward, and those of you that heard Lamont's talk know that every bud has 3 primordial shoots in it: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Well, some of these little rascals, they don't want to just put one out. They say, let's put one out and let's put another one out there. So the manager doesn't know which one is going to be the best one. So you're going through the vineyard, looking at the buds, looking at the shoots, and you're going to let the 2 grow until the one is dominating, and then the one that's not dominating, you're going to have him taken out of there. So that's a shoot removal that goes along with the positioning of the thing. As the canopy grows and the fruit develops, you also around here, you do a leaf removal in the fruiting zone, which is a bottom, bit. What you're doing is taking the leaves off of that area with a view to allowing the sun to get in on the clusters. Research over the last 20 or 15 years has shown that clusters do better if they actually have a complete exposure to sun. Now, of course, the downside of that is that if you have a lot of exposure and the sun is really, really hot, you're likely to get sunburn on those grapes. So again, you're monitoring climate all the time, looking for sunburn possibilities. And again, every vineyard is different, every manager is different, and you will find that some people are going in early in the season, just as the berries, to get them used to it. Other people are going in doing 2 passes of leaf pulling. Some people are going in and taking a lot of leaves off on the east side, so because that's the sun early, and leaving more leaves on the west side to protect them a little bit more from the sun and the possibility of sunburn. At some point too, you're going to say that's enough vegetation. Let's stop this as much as we can, because there is a natural point in the vineyard where these things will actually stop on their own and start directing more energy in the fruit. But you can help that along by hedging. Take the tops off. Don't let them go from 4 feet to 10 feet. Take them off. And occasionally you're going to find that buds that are on the new shoots are going to shoot off a lateral, and it's going to come out the side. We don't want that either. So laterals come off at the same time. So that's, there's fruit load management too, which I class as part of canopy management. Every vine or every shoot will produce clusters, anywhere from 2 to 4 clusters. And again, you're trying to make sure that you don't overcrop them. Everybody says, well, geez, I got 4 clusters in every shoot, I'm gonna leave them all, I'm gonna get a hell of a crop. Well, you don't really, because you've only got a certain amount of energy for these things to ripen that fruit. So you're making decisions all the way along the piece. That one doesn't look like it's ripening, and go on, and that thing falls to the ground. So you don't want to overcrop it. You want to make sure there's 2, maybe 3 if you've got a good healthy shoot. Otherwise, you're overcropping everything, and the plant can't support. So that's fundamentally the canopy management, the fruit load management and the canopy management. So you've got to, fundamentally, you want a nice balance between vegetation and the amount of clusters you have. So the other control you have, management, is the irrigation. And around here, I think most of us know we generally get quite a bit of rain over the winter. So our ground is saturated. And irrigation this time of year is not happening. And most of them have a drip irrigation, but I've never really had to turn it on before mid-July. And I always have a drip, as does everybody, rather than spraying it into the air and have half of it disappearing into the atmosphere. And your timing of irrigation, you can't just set it and say, well, I'm going to have it every Tuesday or Wednesday. You've got to really watch what your weather is doing. Watch your vines. They'll tell you when they need water. You know, you'll get the tops drooping over. The leaves might droop a bit. You can feel the leaf too. If it's got lots of water, it's going to feel cool. If it doesn't have a lot of water, it's going to feel kind of warmish. So again, these are observations that the vineyard manager makes during that season, whether the irrigation goes on or they're stayed off. As you get nearer the harvest, you lessen up the water because less water, more water stress at that time tends to help horizon go faster. So towards the end of the season, you know, turn that off unless you absolutely have to have it. I want to just make a comment too here because I see that occasionally around here where people want to dry farm. Dry farm, you probably all know, which means never put water on anything. And the theory, and it's an old debunked theory, I might add, is that, oh, if you don't give them water, their roots are going to go down lower and pick up water down there. Well, in actual fact, that never really happens. Around here, because we get so much water, trees, vines, everything, their roots mainly go on laterally, horizontally, and they're all within, you know, a foot or so of surface. There's usually one taproot will go down, but overall, you've got the water off. You're not getting anything going down further, folks. You're just going to end up with what I've seen in a couple of vineyards in the island is these things are stunted. The vines don't look healthy, and in my opinion, dry farming, particularly here, it is just not a sensible thing to do. Okay, so canopy management, irrigation. Let's talk a little bit about agrochemicals because it's in most parts of the world there is chemicals used to help control some of the issues in the vineyard, and they're primarily used for the prevention of vine disease and pests. Now, we're relatively fortunate in this part of the world that we don't really have a lot of insect problems in the vineyards. We don't have a lot of other things that might hurt the vine. What we have here is generally two things: powdery mildew, I'm sure most of you know from roses, and botrytis. Botrytis is that gray mold that you might see if you buy grapes in the grocery store and there's a gray mold on them. That's botrytis. And so the main use of chemicals around here is to prevent those two diseases from hitting your fruit, because it can ruin your entire crop if you let them go. So the good news, I guess, is that for powdery mildew, the main application for the vines to prevent powdery mildew is sulfur. And sulfur is considered organic, so you want to be organic. Sulfur is good. You're putting them on probably every 7 to 10 days, again, depending on weather. And you do that right through Verizon, and then the threat of powdery mildew drops off a little bit. Unfortunately, that's when the botrytis becomes a factor too. So you're using a little more, let's call it the big guns of the sprays to get at the botrytis, because botrytis is not touched by sulfur. And that'll go on right to the end of the season. Now, what do these things look like? Powdery mildew is not white, it's actually black on the shoots. The berries will look kind of pale and dull and have little black spots on them. Botrytis is like the initial starting point will look kind of like this burgundy thing with a little rot around it, and that's the incipient botrytis. If it's really bad, it'll actually turn a lot of it as gray. And botrytis handled very well with sprays. If you're looking at a vineyard, look at the back behind the clusters in front. Look at the back of clusters, because that's the ones that didn't get the spray. And if you're going to find botrytis, they're usually on the back side of these clusters. Again, you're going to find people now and again here that use the natural or organic approach, and they don't spray anything other than sulfur. Having worked in some of these vineyards that are natural organic around here, again, it's a terrible mess. I mean, you're producing fruit that's full of disease, botrytis everywhere, and they're shrunk from powdery mildew, and you're trying to make wine out of grapes that are really badly infected. So I'm just not sure what the purpose of that is, frankly, that people would do that, other than you can put this thing on your label, organic wine or natural or whatever. The problem is your fruit yield is way down, and you're having to really work hard in the winery to make a decent wine out of this stuff. Okay, so working to the end here, gang. Pests. We have a number of pests here. Fortunately, again, not as many as some parts of the world. Our main ones here are birds, particularly starlings, deer, raccoons, and wasps. All right. So most vineyards are all netted in some fashion. You can have overhead nets where they pull them right over the vineyard, and you can have nets that are right on the vines themselves, which you close the vines kind of like that. The overheads are perhaps a bit easier to get on there, but birds can dive bomb them and get through this thing. Raccoons look at it as a mild annoyance, and they get through there. And the wasps, they're great. Don't even notice it. So the nets that enclose them, they work fairly well with wasps. They keep birds generally out, although they can squeeze in there. Raccoons, they're tough to control. A lot of vineyards have electric fences they put around their vineyard, and that keeps the raccoons out. Deer, that doesn't bother them. You really have to have a deer fence around your place to keep the deer out. But these problems are all well known, and there are ways to mitigate those pests. 3.